right, welcome to the show, everybody. As always, it's Capital Interactive with Besim and Baz, and we have a very, very important guest today, Jeremey Jenson, and we're going to go through a little bit in terms of his background and just general entrepreneurship. We have a lot of good content today, so stick around, and it's going to be a good show.
Jeremey, appreciate you joining us today, man. I'm excited about today's show because I've known you for a little while here, and you got some really interesting perspective. You started the business for some interesting reasons, had a great experience, and you're doing great. You're killing it. Why don't you start off telling us kind of what business you're in right now, and then we'll get back into your background.
Sure. So I'm, I try to be diversified in a lot of businesses, and so I've over the last 2 years, I've started to get into angel investing. So that's super exciting, but we don't want to talk about those. My main business is, so I'm the founder and CEO of a executive search firm called Encore Search Partners here in Houston. We've got about 27 employees, and we're predominantly focused on headhunting individuals that make like $150,000 and above.
Awesome. Yeah, and you guys have been killing it. I mean, I see you at all the awards ceremonies, fastest growing company, best CEO, all this kinds of different stuff, man. Well, tell us a little bit about some of the success you guys have been having over the last few years.
I think the hardest part with those things is just applying for it, right? And so that's the number one thing that my president does an awesome job of, is making sure that we get on those lists. And
man, we didn't bring you here to be humble, man. We want to hear the real deal, how you grew this business. I mean, you started from nothing, man. So I don't want you to sugarcoat anything today. We want you to give us like the real deal about.
I mean, humble beginnings, A-Leaf, Texas. Single mom. She had me at 16. Living in the apartment complex in a decent neighborhood so I could go to a good school. Watching how hard she worked, and scratching and clawing for as little as we had, it made me really grateful. And I knew that I wanted more out of life, right? And so, I've consistently, looked for ways to innovate and to do things a little bit differently than our competitors, because I feel that, if you're going to try to compete with the 10,000-pound, gorilla, you've got to do things a little bit different. You can't, small retail shops can't go up against Walmart with the exact same marketing strategy and pricing strategy and things of that nature, right? And so, I started my first company in 2010. It was a company called Market Share Solutions, and basically companies would pay me $3,000 a month, and I would send email blasts, right? This is when email marketing started to get super popular. And I kind of found some unique softwares and some data sets that would give me a competitive advantage. And, did that for about 2.5 years, and, built up a nice little business, making about $300,000 in revenue, taking home $200,000 as, a 28-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And then I saw my clients, and I was like, holy cow, I'm charging you $3,000 a month, and you're making like $80,000 a month off of the service that I'm providing, right? And so in 2013, I decided to kind of cut out the middleman, and I started a recruitment company, right? Because a lot of my clients were staffing and recruiting companies. And so it's so funny. People are like, well, what firm did you work for before you started, right? How many years of experience did you have? I was like, I was not a recruiter. Right. I was a digital marketer that saw an industry that could be disrupted by email marketing, right? And I said, I think that I can do it better than all of the other competitors. So like I said, I started a recruiting company in 2013. I think that the reason why we grew is because I wasn't a recruiter, right? Like I was really good at marketing. I was really, really good at business development. I would bring in all of the clients, and then I hired recruiters to find the candidates for the open jobs. Awesome. And so I would say that's how we were able to scale. First placement was in, January of 2013. And, I'm very fortunate and grateful to say that last year we were recognized as the largest privately held executive search firm headquartered in Houston.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I know you guys have been doing great. Tell me a little bit about that beginning process and hiring your first employee, because I think this is where a lot of business owners have that leap of faith where they say, okay, we're big enough now, I need to hire somebody. How did you make that decision and take that leap? Because so many people, they just see it as an expense, where a lot of times they don't look at the opportunity they could have gained by having that additional employee.
Yeah, so employee number one, he's still here today. He's my director of marketing and IT. His name is Larry Sanders. So, I'm a real big self-promoter. I'm words of affirmation as my love language, in the office and in my personal life as well. And so, when things were going well, I would put it on Facebook, and people would see, the new houses, the new cars, the new swag, right? And Larry was one of my Facebook connections because we actually went to high school together. And then one day he posted on Facebook, hey, if anybody is looking for someone that has experience in SEO and digital marketing, I'm looking for an opportunity. He was at his last firm for about 5 years. And I shot him a message and said, hey, dude, I might be looking. What is it that you're looking for total comp? Right. And so he said, well, this year I'm going to make about $65,000. And one of the things that I did as a tiny business owner, hiring employee number one, was I put in variable compensation to get him where he needed to be. So his base at the time was probably 42, 45. And that's a number, right, that a solopreneur can stomach. Based on revenue capture, client retention, things of that nature, that got him to the 65, 70K that he needed to be at, right? And so, that was employee number one. Recruiter number one was a gentleman that was with me for about 7.5 years. He's no longer with the company. He wanted to go build stuff with his hands, right?
Yeah.
And so I always encourage you guys
it's
to
fun.
do stuff.
I love that kind of
that's
work.
going to make you happy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
we sit
definitely.
behind a desk and make cold calls.
Yeah.
So it's not the most exciting thing, but
No doubt. I'm a keyboard warrior.
you're the troll that's like on social media, dude.
I was
Like,
internet
wonder-
tough guy.
I was wondering who that was. Now we know. But it's the boss.
yeah. What's your yeah?
Listen, I'm gonna keep that on the
St-
DL.
Star
Keep that on
Wars
the DL.
fan 91.
92, 91 was taken. Now you know.
He wants everybody to believe that he's younger than he actually is.
If you're getting
That's
trolled, it's Boz, man. Just
Come on.
But man, my first hire was a guy named Kevin D. And like I said, he was with me 7.5 years, but he came to work for me, man, on a draw, not even a base salary. And he was the general manager of a coach's sports bar. And, he would get home at 4 o'clock in the morning. He'd work 80 hours a week. And, he was probably making $75,000. And his wife was like, this isn't sustainable, right?
Yeah.
Like, you got to get a Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 job. And he was actually Larry's friend. I was sitting down with Larry for like lunch one day, and I was like, I think I need to hire a recruiter. And he was like, well, what are you looking for? I said, well, I want someone that was like, a collegiate athlete, because it means that they're coachable and competitive, right? Or at least that's what I think, right?
Sure.
It's got to be someone that's like, scrappy, right? Meaning they don't have the Harvard MBA, right? They're a little bit scrappy, a little bit creative, right? Didn't really have anything handed to them. And then I said, I don't want them to have a degree, actually, because, typically once individuals get degrees, they have a few more options in the business world, and it becomes a little bit more competitive, right, to retain those individuals because people are trying to like offer them raises to steal them, right? And then I said this other thing, and I said, I want his wife or girlfriend to be better looking than him. And Larry said, what does that mean?
yeah.
I said it means they got game, right? It means they got rap. It means
never
they've
thought about
got
it that
word
way.
track. It means that they can close.
Sure.
Right? And so I bet you all three of our girlfriends and wives are like better looking than us, right?
That's a very low bar. Yes, I think all three of us would definitely say
That's
we
a-
outkicked our cup.
Absolutely.
It's a very low bar.
Yeah, absolutely. But Larry said, I know your guy. It's this guy Kevin that I used to work with at a company called Mags for Cheap. And so interviewed Kevin, made him an offer. It was like $500 a week. And that first year he probably made $75,000. The next year he made 100, 120, 150, right?
Man,
This
killing
is
it.
the type of industry that once you build your network, once you get, some credibility in a specific vertical, right? Whether you recruit engineers or attorneys or wealth advisors, people tend to make you the first call whenever they're passively looking for a new opportunity. And so that was hire number one, man, and it's funny because at $500 a week, that's what the offer letter would say. Like, we would terminate people so fast if they weren't the right person. We didn't even talk in terms of annual salary. Where like you're $500 a week. Let's see how many weeks you make it. Right. And so it's just funny to see how far we've come in the last 8 years.
Well, I mean, on that scale too, it's a lot of you get to eat what you kill, right? Because I mean, nobody's surviving on 500. So it really does, I think, give you that fuel and that drive to see if you can almost. It's like a game. Can I beat my high score last week? Can I beat my high score last month? And keep going. And I think that propels a lot of people. When you have that comfortable base salary, what's your motivation to keep pushing, right? Because you know you're guaranteed X amount of money.
Absolutely. And I don't want to like shit on, industries where they have high base salaries because they have very long sales cycles. Maybe it's a sophisticated solution sell, right? So you look at, commercial banking, you look at attorneys, you look at industries like that where it's not as transactional, right? It's a little bit more relationship driven and a long-term solution sell, right? But
well, actually, man, this is a topic I wanted to dig into. I was thinking we'll get into it a little bit later on, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about employee retention because both from as a business owner's perspective, but then also you're out there seeing people that are leaving and the reasons why they're leaving and what kind of compensation structures are helping them. What's the culture mean? All that type of stuff. So I'd like to get into that actually in the second half of the interview, man. So, unless you guys want to do it just right now. But
no, I think that's a good question, and I'd like to have it on two fronts. It's not just about the retention, but how do you attract the right talent? Like what really goes into that? You talked about a couple of your first hires in your thought process, but when it goes to attracting good talent and then the other side of the coin, retaining that talent, because like you said, there's always going to be people trying to snipe talent.
Yeah, so, I think those are two very, very different topics to discuss. I really liked your question to say like, hey, based on the trends that you're seeing, you're a headhunter, you poach people. What are the reasons why good people leave their firm, right? And what can companies do in order to retain those people? That's a great topic to discuss. And to that same token, what do we do to attract top talent, right? And so let's tackle
let's go ahead and talk to them.
Which one do you want to talk about first? For sure.
Well, let's first talk about like why people leave.
Man, it's there's really no cookie cutter answer, right? I mean, I think that there's an old adage that they say that people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses. I absolutely agree with that. Now, with that being said, there's a variety of different reasons why somebody that has an amazing boss, that they have a great relationship with, that they're getting, their tank filled, emotionally, by that individual, right, through, words of affirmation and gratitude and things like that. But, in those instances, when I do have a candidate that has an amazing relationship with their boss, what it is it's they've hit a glass ceiling, right? It's a scenario where the company's just really not big enough to create opportunities for career advancement, and they see that like my boss isn't going anywhere, and in order for me to develop in my career, unfortunately, just due to the structure of the organization, I need to move on to another environment. And so you see that a lot more common in smaller companies, right? Because let's say you're an accounting manager and you've been in the role for 3 years and you want to diversify your experience in finance, right? And your boss, you're reporting to a corporate controller who reports to a CFO who reports to the CEO. Well, there's not two corporate controllers, right? And so that would be the perfect scenario where I would leave for the title bump. I would leave for more responsibility, but more importantly, it's an opportunity to diversify my skill set, right? And so, you have A players, you have B players, right? You have C players. I think one of the things that we all need to recognize as business owners is if we had an environment with just 100% A players, then everybody would want to be scratching and clawing in order to get to the top, right? Yeah. And there's only a finite number of leadership roles that you can have in an organization. And so, the thought of having that type of a culture, it's very difficult to retain top talent. And B players are needed. Right, they're steady eddies. They show up, they do the job, they're grateful, right? And that's no disrespect, but
it's just like when we watch these NBA teams, they get all these superstars, and then a lot of times they don't even achieve what they're trying to do.
Are you doing a plug because you used to play professional basketball?
No,
y'all can't see, but Besim is like 6'14".
I have
That
hops.
was
Why is it always got to be about basketball?
I had
Basim?
hops too, man.
Yeah, but you're right. Yeah, elaborate on that. The
Yeah,
NBA
but like,
players.
if you remember
Yeah.
the Lakers back in the day, they went and got, I think it was like Karl Malone, Gary Payton, they had Kobe, all these people, and they couldn't get the championship done.
Glenn Rice was on that squad.
Yeah, all
right?
kinds of
Everybody.
people, and so it's
Yeah.
like sometimes you don't have somebody that's willing to do all the nitty gritty work. They all want the ball. You
Well,
can only go so
there's
many
nothing
places.
wrong with being that
Yeah.
sixth man, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you play a very critical role in the same, segues into business. You can't have all earners and burners. You got to have those support characters. And to that point, I think there's people that also embrace that role. I don't think being a
100%.
six man's a bad thing. I think you've embraced what you do.
Yeah, and so I also want to follow that up with saying there are organizations that they only have a culture where they breed A players. And it's called an upper out mentality, right? And so I'm not saying that it can't be successful, but it's very difficult to build strong employee retention, right? And an amazing corporate culture. The reason why those firms are successful, and I don't want to pick on some of the smaller ones that I know here in Houston, right? Because I've got a lot of friends that even work at these firms. So we'll talk about like Big Four. They have an upper out mentality. And what that means is you're either getting promoted or you get the hell out. Right? Go in-house, right? We have a finite number of manager, senior manager, director, principal, senior director, managing director, partner roles. And all these young studs that are busting their ass, working 90 hours a week, grinding, getting all their professional certs and like pouring their heart, blood, sweat, and tears into this organization, we're not going to like inhibit them from having upward mobility because you want to be stagnant in that senior manager role. So it works in that environment.
Yeah.
But they get amazing training, right? It creates unwavering work ethic, right? And employers that want to hire people that are formally trained, that have amazing work ethic, that have a very high pedigree, they tend to like recruiting out of Big Four because it's like, dude, if you can survive in that environment, like, hey, we're not going to make you work 80 hours a week. Will you work 60? And that person's like, oh yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
You've made it through the gauntlet, right?
You've made it through the gauntlet. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. That reminds me. You remember, like, what was that TV show where, like, it was like, American Gladiators?
American
American
Gladiator.
Gladiators.
Yeah, dude.
Absolutely.
I
That was a
like
bad
8 years
bleep
old
show.
watching
That was
those
good.
ladies. Those ladies were incredible.
Yeah.
They were
man.
jacked, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I thought of that whenever you're talking
Remember
about
when
the
they
gauntlet.
were up on the top with like that big
Oh, yeah.
Nerf gun and they had to
Shoot
like
everybody.
hide behind pillars and they're like, doof, doof.
We should
Yeah.
we should build that today.
Yeah.
We should. I mean,
like
that would
you
be,
get the job if you make it through the gauntlet. Like, that would
100%.
be
Let's do that.
amazing. We're gonna
I
trademark
told you we
that
like
right
to
here.
hire college athletes, right? We'd have people like doing roles and stuff
Exactly,
like that. Like
yeah.
only the Navy SEALs.
How
make
bad
it.
do you want it? Tell me.
So that's my experience here on retaining people, right? Hey, look, we've got to give them an opportunity for career advancement if they're an A player, right? Some other reasons.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Some other reasons, and I hate that this is even a thing, but industry norm, if you stay at an organization, let's say you're at GE, and you take an accounting job straight out of school, you're making $55K, you get a 3 to 5% raise year over year, right? That's like consistently market, and it kind of matches inflation, right? And so if you're there for 10 years and you're getting 5%, 5%, 5%, 5%, I don't have a calculator right now, but let's just say that you're making $100,000, right? Well, whenever you change companies, industry norm is to get a 10 to 20% raise.
Sure.
Right.
So
We see that often. It's almost like you're more incentivized to go elsewhere
It's
to get the bigger
ridiculous.
bump than to be rewarded from progressing internally. That's
it's
absolutely
ridiculous.
common. Yeah.
And so you know what I do, right? And I hope my employees would 100% agree with this, but I don't pay people on time and tenure. You know what I pay them on? Cost of replacement.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's awesome.
Cost of replacement. I have a young lady that works for me. She's our training and operations manager now. Her name's Blair Sweeney. And, she started, it was her second job out of college, and maybe her base was like $45K, right? And fast forward 12 to 14 months later, she's already been promoted twice.
Awesome.
Right? She's experienced a huge pay increase, probably double from where she was at. But it's cost of replacement. I wish more employers would see that.
I think
smart.
there's a lot of issues with a larger employer doing that. So a lot of times they'll put in policies where they have certain caps on stuff. Even if that person's super valuable, maybe they can't get past that cap in pay, or maybe this band or whatever it is. So I think, having that flexibility in a smaller business is something that that, it's a little bit easier. But if you're going to like a large corporate, a lot of times it's more difficult.
That's
to get
very
that done,
true.
you know?
And the way that they combat that, because they do have the bans, is they literally just promote people very quickly.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's not last week, I was invited. A friend of mine, Lauren Payne, is the founder of a group called the Arise Leadership Network. And basically it's like a co-op of, young emerging leaders here in Houston. And, we spend time together in order to, just, make each other sharper. Right. And so she called in a favor with the CEO of Crown Castle. And have you heard of the company? It's a Fortune 500. It's the largest owner of telecom infrastructure in the entire nation.
No, I'm not familiar with
them. So their clients are companies like Verizon and folks like that. And so this guy's the CEO of a company that has a $70 billion market cap, right? And he invited us to his ranch in Navasota, Texas, that sits on 1,000 acres. And he's got private basketball courts, private volleyball courts.
I would assume he has a private clearing for skeet shooting and all that stuff. If you wanted to.
Yeah. I don't know. Like if insurance liability purposes, I can disclose that's there, right? But no, this place was incredible. And he's sitting here and he's blocking out his entire day to sit with 14 young emerging leaders. And one of the things that he discloses an hour into the day is he's like, yeah, this afternoon I have my Q4 earnings call. And it's like, you're here.
Oh yeah, I think
as
I heard
CEO
you
of a Fortune
posting
500.
about this other day on LinkedIn. Yeah,
but just the fact that he
took his time out.
invested his time in order to motivate and inspire us to not just get better, but to realize our potential, right? Because I think that's one of the things that we need to see as leaders is what somebody's true potential is, right?
Yeah,
and so
definitely.
It was an incredible experience. The guy is amazing. His name is Jay Brown, and it was a great experience. But I kind of got sidetracked. So giving raises.
How much does money play a factor in the move? I mean, a lot of times it's not necessarily the most important thing, but it's definitely important. But how much do you see people moving just for money?
It really depends on the discipline, right? Whether it's an engineer or an accountant or a salesperson, right? And I think when it's a salesperson, money's the factor 95% of the time, right? Because look, I mean, it could be okay, the company has a better reputation, right? The company has more product lines. Well, that inadvertently will give you the opportunity to sell more, which equates to more money, right? And so it might necessarily be base salary, right? But I think as a salesperson, you want to be in an environment where you can maximize your income, right?
Yeah,
as salespeople, we talk about money all day. How much something costs, how much you could save, how much you can increase your top line, increase your bottom line, etc.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't
and
think
so
about
money
that.
is super important to salespeople. Now, I say salespeople, but what I mean is revenue producers, right? And so that can come in a variety of different industries, right? Insurance, attorneys, wealth advisors, investment bankers, commercial bankers, etc. But it's not as important as I've seen, right, in identifying the patterns over the last 8 years and placing over 700 professionals. It's not as important for individuals that are in dual income families, right? And so let's say if the husband's making 120 grand, wife's making 150, right? Leaving for a $20,000 jump, that's not life-changing money for someone, right? If I'm making $80,000, single income household, right? I have a stay-at-home wife, 2 kids, $20,000 raise is a massive, right? Life changer, right? And so that's what I'll say is whenever you get a little bit, up into maybe the 150 to 200 range, money becomes a little bit less important because unless you're going from 175 to 275, it's a nominal life changer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift a little bit and talk about culture, like we were talking about, and how that plays a part in retention and those type of things, and what kind of things you see people doing to kind of retain the talent. I mean, we talked about why people leave. I guess it's just everything the opposite of what you said. Now, how do you retain?
So I think one of the massive parts of retaining people is understanding, how they like to be recognized, right? And so some people do like words of affirmation. Some people like
everybody's different,
to be poured into with regards to mentorship and training. Some people like, new monitors or a new laptop or something to that effect, right? And so my president, his name is Scott Kelly. He's been with our firm for about 4.5 years. He's the guy that's like the culture expert, right? He's the one that came into an environment where we were making, 1.2 million in revenue. We're a small shop. It was like 6 dudes in a little strip center in Richmond, Texas, wearing boots and blue jeans to work. And, it was like Wild West.
Yeah.
And I was making a lot of money because we had very little overhead. We didn't have 401k and benefits and things of that nature. But Scott came in, he brought in processes, systems, accountability. Right, that's what actually gave us the infrastructure in order to be able to scale. But it cost money to create an environment where you can attract amazing people. Right, I had to do a 401k. I had to offer health benefits. I had to have a structured paid time off policy. I had to hire a training manager, right, that would mentor and train new hires in order to be successful. Right, we had to invest in new technology, and so it's funny because. You talked about retention, right? And retention costs money.
Yeah, definitely.
You can't just take somebody to lunch every Friday, give them a high five and say, well, fuck, here's your Jason's Deli. You like working here, right? All right, good. Go back to work. Make me rich.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. It takes money to make money, and I think that's a very important part of that culture and everything that you're building in the offerings to stay competitive. I mean, who's going to go somewhere where do I have retirement benefits? Do I have health benefits? So it now has changed the game from when you were a small shop to now. Yeah, it takes money to retain talent.
Absolutely. And one of the ways that we've built an amazing culture, I think, is really hinged upon the fact that about 2.5-3 years ago, we implemented a system called the Entrepreneurial Operating System,
yes,
which is a business framework that was founded upon some of the principles that came from the book Traction, written by a gentleman by the name of Gino Wickman. And, really what that promoted was openness, honesty, transparency in an organization, creating a definitive mission, defining your vision, identifying what your core values are, hiring, coaching, firing to those core values, and not having any instances where you waver from those, right? And so, when we rolled out EOS, people were like, oh, okay, yeah, this is cool, and then they started to see how serious we were about it. We said, hey, look, we're not going to work on jobs that are under 100K. And, we started telling our clients, no, thank you, right? You can call, Lucas Group or, somebody else, right? And when people start to see oh my God, the company has the discipline to walk away from this, right? And we can be very narrowly focused and intentional about how we're going to scale and in the areas and the sandboxes that we want to play in, people started to see that we were serious, right? They also started to see that we were serious whenever we started to coach people out of the organization. It's funny that when you look at my top biller from 2013, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19, every one of those years, that individual has been managed out of the organization. Isn't that unbelievable?
Yeah.
To think that we have the discipline to just be so committed to our core values and our vision to where if you're going to violate those, I don't care how much revenue you produce, right? We got to get you off the bus.
So, well, that's kind of interesting because it seems like that's like a trend now. Like your top producer, like what's happening to them that's making them get to a position where they don't fit with your core values anymore?
Well, I don't know. I mean, there's a variety of different reasons, right? Well, our specific core values are going to be excellence, gratitude, meticulousness, competitiveness.
So it's just is it happening once somebody gets to a certain point that then they're
who knows,
getting complacent or
who knows,
you don't know.
Right? I mean, I don't.
Well, I mean, it could save you a lot of money if you finding new people all the time if you figure that out, right? So I mean, how do you try to tackle an issue like that, or do you what do you do?
I think that we've when we do it the first time, you're like, holy shit, I don't want to lose $400,000 in revenue. And then you see that okay, the individual that took over that book of business now yielded $500,000 in revenue, right? They're a little bit more committed to the culture.
Sure.
When we started EOS, our top producer back in 2016, 17 was probably $385,000 in production. Our top producer last year, $840,000 in production. And it's because we stayed committed to the program, right? We want to go up market. We want to be very narrowly focused on, managing to the KPIs. We want to be very intentional about giving them more tools and resources to be successful, right? And so one of the things that I've always told people once they get a little bit cocky or arrogant, right, and puffy chests, whenever they start making real money, right? When you have a producer that 3 years ago made $50,000 and last year made $300,000, right? Maybe something happened psychologically to that person. But at the end of the day, that $840,000 in production, right? Whether that goes away or whether, I need 2 people that are 400K producers in order to yield that, somebody will always be number 1.
Sure.
I could fire 1, 2, and 3 today if they didn't adhere to the core values, right? And then guess what? There's a new number 1.
Right.
Isn't that unbelievable? And I think that employers need to be very disciplined about recognizing that when you have a cancer in the organization, you need to cut it out.
Yeah, definitely.
You absolutely. And so
It's a very good point.
even if you lose that person and 100% of their productivity, but the individuals around them, if their productivity is now increased because they're more excited and committed, right? If their productivity is increased by 20%, but it's 8 people, right, there's 160% of productivity growth right there.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. For our viewers, again, can you reference the name of that book that you were talking about?
So the book is called Traction, and the author's name is Gino Wickman,
Okay.
Gino.
Yeah,
We'll put a
well-
link in the description for that book, so y'all can check that
So
out.
don't give me the credit. Remember I told you about that cool-ass president that I heard?
Yeah.
His name's Scott Kelly.
Yeah.
That's the business guy. Right?
Awesome.
I'm like the funny, inspirational, motivational CEO,
Yes.
business development, marketing guy. Whenever it comes to reading books and being very intentional about personal and professional development, right? That's Scott. And I think that it's very valuable for business owners to have the humility to say, I might be the best person at doing my job, but in order for me to elevate to the next level, I need to hire somebody that can fill in my blind spots.
Right.
Right.
I want to ask you a quick question because we did one of our last podcasts we did about accelerated growth of a business versus a lifestyle entrepreneur, and we talked really briefly about it here prior to getting on camera. And I wanted to just get your thoughts because this kind of goes with that. I want you to get your thoughts on 2 specific points when it comes to that. First is the use of leverage to grow your business, because I think me and you align one way and maybe Adam's a different way. And then second thing, if you could talk a little bit about what you just said is kind of how you focused on scaling your business.
Sure.
I mean, you touched on it already a little bit, but maybe just a little
so
bit
let's
more
change.
expanding.
So I'm going to use an experience share. And I'm in a group called the Entrepreneurs Organization. EO is a global co-op of over 14,000 entrepreneurs. In Houston, we have about 175. I'm on the board. It's a massive component of my life. Socially, I gain a lot from a lot of the leadership training and things of that nature. But I met an individual through EO who she is an MD. She has a Harvard MBA. She is the chairman of a large regional bank here in Houston. And she's one of the most humble and grateful people that I've ever met. She's incredible. Her dad founded the bank about 30 years ago. And so now she's the executive chairman. But the point that I'm making is she contracted our firm to recruit a new CEO. And she's talking to me about, what characteristics this individual is going to have in order to be successful. And, she owns she's the chairman of a bank called Southwestern National Bank, and it's in Chinatown here in Houston. And their definitive growth strategy is they want to cater to the Chinese community and the Vietnamese community from a deposit standpoint. What she illustrated to me is that Chinese people don't trust banks culturally. And, if it's a Chinese bank, that there's maybe like a more higher susceptibility for them to trust, and that they don't necessarily like risk. They like cash, right? Like they put it literally under the mattress.
Sure.
And so she's like, we have all the deposits from our Chinese and Vietnamese community, right? They've got over 800 million in assets, okay, from the local Houston Chinese and Vietnamese community. But then she said, you know who we lend to, Jeremy? And I said, no, the Chinese people. They said, no, they don't believe in leverage. They believe in paying cash.
Right.
We gather the assets from the Chinese community and we lend to the Indo-Paki community.
Really?
That culturally, they love leverage, right? They can borrow to make money every day of the week. And so when you walk in and you see like this guy at a Murphy's Deli, and like, you find out that like this man owns 11 Murphy's Delis. This person owns 14 freaking Shell gas stations.
Yeah.
This person owns, XYZ, right? But that's very prevalent in the Indo-Paki community. And so I'll segue into talking about one of my very best friends. I won't name names, but his family, he's of Indo-Paki descent. And his family owns over 2,200 fast food restaurants nationwide. Over 2,200. We're talking about billions in revenue.
Yeah, crazy.
We're talking about employing over 30,000 employees. And his father moved here from India in the 1980s with no money.
Yeah.
And you know how he grew into the largest privately owned owner of over 2,200 fast food restaurants? Leverage. You got to borrow. Borrow. That's his culture, right? And it's funny because you look at, people on TV that are talking about like no debt and you got to this and these economics and I think that there's definitely cases that can be made from both sides, but this family has created generational wealth through leverage. And so it's funny because he says, Jeremy, we don't need to make money on the restaurants. We could probably make, $20,000, $40,000, $50,000 in net income from a Burger King in, Waxahachie, Texas. But where we make our money is we buy the property and the restaurant pays it off in 12 years. So now I have a property that I used as leverage, right? I used a franchise system, and they now created a $2.3 million entity that I own outright in 12 years.
Sure.
And so multiply that times 2,200 times, this family is worth B.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, definitely.
Because of leverage. They didn't wake up one day and say, I like flipping burgers, I want to own a Burger King. They saw the path of least resistance. How can I borrow money? Well, hey, they'll give me money if this is a proven process and way to generate revenue, which is a Burger King, right? A KFC, a Long John Silver's, right? A Wendy's. You guys love levering on those.
Yeah.
So
banks love lending. That's where they make a lot of money.
Banks love lending, but to the point of leverage, it really matters on the situation. You have this family with over 2,000 restaurants. I mean, that is something that's going to be capital intensive, right? You have to borrow money to literally build that empire, but that doesn't apply to every business and every situation.
Oh, I want to make like a segue comment.
Okay, go ahead.
So you said, hey, Jeremy, you're such a big proponent of leverage, right? We know that.
Oh, no, I wasn't saying that you were a proponent of leverage.
No, but I'm saying that I literally have just talked for the last 12 minutes on why it's incredible and like life-changing. I think there's another way that entrepreneurs can lever, right? And it's not always capital.
Yeah.
The way that I leveraged myself was I went out and I got talent, right? And so that was an expense.
Yeah.
I didn't need to dilute, equity ownership in the company because I could go out and get W-2 employees to kind of do the work. And that was my way of leveraging myself and not just doing it on my own.
Yeah, I think I like that thought process and the way that you think about that, because I'm kind of more debt averse than like maybe other bankers might be. Definitely more than this guy that's a billionaire, and maybe that's not. That's probably why I'm not a billionaire. But I kind of lean more towards borrow less, pay off debt quickly. That's kind of more how I am personally. But I do, like you said, I do see a case. I've seen a lot of business owners really accelerate their growth through borrowing. But I really like the way that you think about employees as leveraging, because
internal leverage.
Yeah,
because that's a very smart way of looking. Because you're right, it is a leverage in a sense, but yours is more internalized. Be it the general operating cost of having an employee that's a producer. It's not capital lending per se, but that's still an internal leverage. And that's a very outside of the box way of thinking about that. That's unique. I like that.
Can I quote that? That's great.
Have it. It's yours. Just give me my residual.
I love it. There you go.
Okay, give us a little bit of your thoughts on just like general employment market right now. I know we're in a part of the country that's probably a little bit better than maybe some other parts of the country, but kind of give us your idea and your thoughts on what's going on. Unemployment rates are high, but some parts of the country are doing really well, and then maybe that in your specific vertical where it's more higher net worth, high earners, maybe it's different. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing just from a market standpoint?
So I would say that I'm maybe not as in tune with the macroeconomics of how COVID and quarantine have, affected everything. But, what I can say is everybody wants to work from home right now. Right. And I think that employers that aren't on board with giving great talented people an opportunity to work from home if they can, right? Like obviously if you're front desk, at a Shell gas station or something like that, you can't work from home. But the point that I'm making is we're seeing talented people literally change companies because their company is rigid and have an outdated way of thinking and not giving them an opportunity to work from home, even though they probably can. Okay. And so that's one way that the market is kind of affected and some of the movement that we're seeing right now. As far as unemployment, I would say that I have a sneaky suspicion that a lot of that is kind of in the lower, vertical, right? Yeah. And so it's one of the toughest markets that I've ever seen to get talented people. And the big reason why is they're like, if my company didn't lay me off during COVID, right, then I'm fucking safe. I don't want to change companies right now. Yeah. So I'm going to stick it out. I don't care if you give me a 20% raise. Right. I don't want to be the new man on the, on the totem pole. Yeah. Right? Sure. So, and so that's one thing that we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of movement for us, we're really big in recruiting attorneys and wealth advisors. We're seeing a lot of movement of wealth advisors, for the simple fact that the stock market is very high right now, and they get paid their compensation and their transition deals based on their trailing 12 months production. And so in their mind, they're like, I want to cash out whenever I think that I'm at the top. Right,
before the bottom falls out.
And so we're seeing a lot of movement there. And then there's a massive need, unfortunately, I hate to even say it, bankruptcy attorneys, M&A attorneys, divorce attorneys. And so, it's almost embarrassing that we're making money off of other people's unfortunate,
But, you got to go and you got to serve the market need. And if that's, where the pool is, you got to kind of swim in it.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Okay. Why don't you give us, some of your top tips for business owners? You've done a great job of kind of growing the company. Give us a little bit of thoughts on kind of some of the most important things or advice that you could give business owners, people that are starting out or trying to grow.
Yeah, so I don't like giving advice, and I think that EO taught me that we don't give each other advice. When you get, 180 successful entrepreneurs in a room and you start trying to give each other advice, it can be a very toxic environment, right?
And is that predicated on arrogance, just because it worked for me doesn't mean it's going to work for you, and
it's
you
like, who the fuck are you? You don't know my business,
right?
You own a fucking 43 Dairy Queens, I'm in corporate real estate,
right?
Yeah.
The secret is getting the custard the day before you pour. That's the secret.
We've probably got a lot of guys that are all alphas too, though. People that
I don't think you get to this point by not being more
exactly.
Yeah.
And you say guys. I'm
very
proud of the fact.
I don't mean all men.
Not that there's anything wrong with it.
Women too.
Women too. Absolutely. I think female entrepreneurs are probably the fastest, growing vertical. Right.
Yeah.
But what I can say is I don't like giving advice because I've been in EO for 3 years and I've adopted something called the Gestalt method. Are you familiar with this?
I've heard of it, but no.
And so Gestalt promotes the idea of doing experience share not giving advice, right? And so what I'll do is I'll give my experience, and then hopefully your viewers that are entrepreneurs can take it away. So you got to remember, man, I owned an email marketing company in 2010. I'm really good at sending email blasts. For a long time, that's all I did. That's how I generated revenue. Built the company to about $2 million in revenue. Didn't even have a salesperson, right? And in order to get to the next level, right, I was like, golly, I got to break through this ceiling, right? 2 million, yeah, I'm making good money, but like, you can only like spam people a finite number of times, right? You know, like you hit them the first time, you get like, you know, a 20% response. You hit them again, you get like, you know, 5%, then 3%, then 1%.
Oh yeah.
So in order for us to kind of break through that ceiling, what we had to do was we had to start making cold calls. And so in my experience, right, like all these people, they talk about how cold calling is dead and, you know, people get screened out and, you know, we've got caller ID now and we've got sophisticated things. Yeah. It just means you need to make more cold calls.
Right. It's a volume game.
It's 100% a volume game. We had this conversation yesterday with my top producer from 2020. His name is Simon Jim, and we were talking about the biggest invoice that he'd ever sent out. The fee was $286,000. That was our fee, and his commission was a massive portion of that. And he's like, dude, it was just a name. It was a line on a fucking Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
It was a line, you know, row 1,721 in an Excel spreadsheet with 8,000 name, title, firm, direct dial. Right?
Yeah.
And he's like, you'd never know. Smile and dial.
Yeah.
Smile and dial.
Yeah.
What I've been seeing right
You
now,
know?
I don't know if you guys are seeing it too, but people are picking up the phone a lot more since the pandemic hit. I've been able to get in and talk to people that I haven't been able to talk to in a long time because right now they just, you know, a lot of them are like at home and they're tired of being at home by themselves, you know, so they're answering the phone.
And don't get me wrong, right? You know, hitting people on LinkedIn, developing relationships through networking events, that'll get you to a certain level. I mean, don't get me wrong, but then you plateau. You run out of hours in the day. You run out of contacts on LinkedIn. You run out of people that are willing to engage. Yeah. And so in order to break that ceiling for us from 2 million to 6 million, we had to fucking smile and dial. So that's my number one experience here. Cold calling is not dead. Pick up the phone. We had T-shirts made 2 summers ago for July 4th weekend. And the T-shirts said "Grow balls, make calls."
Yeah,
I loved it.
I need one of those shirts.
Yeah. So
Dude, I have a quick question because I've been in.
I got one in a 2XL.
I'll wear it, bro.
Hey, so I was going to ask you about the cold calling. I mean, do you guys ever? This is just like a kind of sidebar, but do you guys ever do like cold calling together? Like I was in an organization and basically,
like you hold hands and
basically,
you know,
yeah. No, I was in an organization and basically like we would block off these like 2-hour blocks.
Yeah,
where we're
power
doing
hours.
Yeah, but we'd like sit together and talk and like I'd call somebody and someone's listening to my cold call and then like critique me afterwards and then
we've
like,
done
do
that.
the same thing. Like, do you guys do any of that or is it just
No,
like
I don't.
everyone's got their own?
Man, everybody's on the phone.
Yeah.
Period, though.
Oh, okay.
You know, and so I guess like every hour is power hour here
Yeah,
at
yeah,
Encore
yeah,
Search
yeah.
Partners. And I don't like giving feedback right after calls. Right. What I always tell new employees. That you know they don't know anything yet, right? Here's the list, here's the phone, here's your computer, like
Go
grow balls,
after
make
it,
calls. I tell them, I say, hey, look, your first 200 calls are gonna suck. They're the worst.
Sure.
You're gonna be garbage.
You're rough.
My first 200 calls in I don't know how old I was. No, I was 23 years old in 2007, right? My first 200 calls were garbage. So I tell them, you can either get them out of the way in 2 days, or you can let it last 2 weeks. What's it going to be? You just got to do it, right? And so if I would have listened to the call, shit on the call, listen to it, shit on it,
Take
listen
forever.
to it, shit on it. Not only would it take forever, it would be emotionally exhausting for that person. They would feel defeated. They would quit. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that like a lot of like recruiting shops and sales organizations that do that, super high turnover.
Interesting.
Super high turnover. So we don't do that. So we listen to the calls like after the
Afterward.
fact.
Well, to your point, I ended up leaving that place pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So that's been my experience. So another like I don't know, like experience share on tips for CEOs. this is one thing that I've done, and it's been incredible for our recruiting, for our business development, for our retention, is don't be afraid to be your true authentic self. You know, if like you're like super into triathlons, or you're like, you know, I don't know, like super diehard Trump supporter, like, you know, don't hide it. Right, wave the flag. The people that are not on board with it will self-select out, but the other people that like that is like motivating and exciting, and those people will gravitate towards you. Right. And so I think as business owners, we try to be super neutral. We try to be super corporate. We don't want to like, you know.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, don't put on a show. Just be you.
Be you, man.
It sounds so simple. It sounds like, the easiest.
Elon Musk, perfect example. Guy's a fucking maniac. The people that work for him think that he's the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
But he's himself.
Right.
Does it affect his shareholders sometimes? Yeah, sure. But how is it affected in the grand scheme of things over the last 36 months?
Yeah,
it's massive.
Crazy.
The guy does dumb shit.
Yeah.
Right? Trump, that guy does idiotic stuff. He's got unwavering supporters that think that he's the most amazing thing ever. And so I'm not supporting Trump, guys. Like, that's not what I'm doing. But I'm saying, like, he's his true, authentic self, and he got, like, the most important job in the world.
Yeah,
right? Now, it's very polarizing.
Yeah.
But, like, as a CEO, whenever you become your true, authentic self, you might break some eggs along the way, whether it's clients that want to self-select out, whether it's employees want to self-select out, but it like strengthens that bond, and it creates trust, rapport, credibility, and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to go somewhere too, I mean, because like if you're always basically stepping on eggshells, you know, you're always going to be timid when trying to make a decision. You're not going to move as quickly as somebody that knows who they are and where they want to go.
Yeah.
And I think that goes to being your authentic self. Yeah.
Now I will say, so I'm unwaveringly my authentic self. Okay. And it does get me in trouble sometimes, right? You know, we have HR, we have certain things, right? But I think another thing that's like critically important is to have emotional intelligence.
Emotional intelligence, that's a good follow-up point. We'll pick up on there. There's a good book on emotional intelligence. I can't, do you have a book in mind? Because we can link it.
So my president does. It's called Emotional Intelligence 2.0.
Emotional Intelligence 2.0. Again, we'll have a link in the description on that book. But tell us, give us some Cliff's Notes version of the book, but also why it's important and why it's important to use that in conjunction with being your authentic self.
So, I kind of pride myself on being self-aware. We did an exercise last week. We did a training as an entire organization, and it was called, Best Qualities of a Boss. And, I put my best qualities were like, expert in their field. They reward me financially, right? There's all these different variables that just like I personally thought were like the most incredible components of a boss. And then, but we asked all 27 of our employees to do it, right? And so you do that times 3 because they had to pick their 3 best qualities. And so they were written on little sticky notes. And then we had this big, huge chart, and one was IQ, one was EQ, right? So like that's the emotional intelligence, right? Or they have a quality, like the emotional qualities of a leader, right? And the other one was like, expertise, right? Technical expertise. And I'm sitting here thinking like fucking IQ and technical expertise. You know what my team put? EQ. There was 27 times 3, so that's a lot. It's 81, but they put like 9 in the IQ section, like 13 in the technical expertise, and then like 60 in the EQ section.
Well, it's all about how you treat people, right?
It's about how you treat people.
That's what they want.
And here's the point. I've been doing this for a long time. My first company I started in 2010. Right, I've made a lot of money along the way. And this was an eye-opening experience for me. And so you talk about emotional intelligence. I think that, a lot of people think, right, that they have empathy. A lot of people think that they know how to communicate and that they do a good job of speaking to individuals on the way that they need to be coached and the way that they need to be developed. But, we do need to be very intentional about refining that, right? I mean, we talk about continuous improvement in a manufacturing environment. We need to absolutely put that stuff in professional services environments too, you know? And so like, you know, I'm very grateful that my president does exercises like that. He's the one that's the expert in emotional intelligence. He made us all read a book called Emotional Intelligence 2.0. I'm like a serial procrastinator, and I didn't read the book. Like, I read the Cliffs Notes.
I just do the audiobooks. Audiobooks are just so much easier.
You know, I'd rather listen to Post Malone when I'm driving into the office than audiobooks.
Hey, teach their own.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, I appreciate you kind of sharing so much with us, man. I feel like we could sit here and talk all day, man. There's just like so much to cover. You got an amazing story. The organization you built has been great. But you know, we're gonna try to wrap it up here so we can let you back to your day. But any like parting thoughts you would say to business owners before we go?
So to business owners, I would say that, you know, the way that I scaled was I implemented EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And you know, it's nothing that's like super revolutionary. Really, all it is it's a framework that allows you to like extrapolate your own thoughts and vision, and you document it, and then it's a set of tools that hold you accountable to it. Now, it means nothing if you don't have somebody that's processes and systems oriented in order to do it. And most entrepreneurs are like super like extroverted or visionaries. We're like, you know, big thinkers. We're not like super analyst doers, right? Yeah. And so I would encourage CEOs to get what's called an integrator, if you're talking in EOS terms. So I'm the visionary, Scott's the integrator. And, you know, Scott doesn't run a book of business, right? I can't directly tie revenue to Scott like I can tie it to my executive vice president, Casey Knight, who runs our largest business unit that yields over $4 million in production, right? Yeah. But here's the deal. That integrator that has that emotional intelligence, that has that EOS toolbox, somebody that I trust, somebody that I let make the big decisions, right, upon my stamp of approval. But if that guy can increase everybody's productivity by 15%, right, whether they're in the emotional state of mind, whether they've got the technical expertise, tools, and resources to be successful, if you do, just through the law of compounding, right, 115% times 115% times one, you know, you're talking about getting a 4x return off of having an amazing integrator. And so that would be my advice to CEOs, is hire a COO or an integrator that is not like you. I think we always want to hire people that are like our proteges, you know, and I'm going to just like duplicate myself. Well, if you do that, you're only ever going to be limited to your own individual capabilities. And so by having Scott, that's what's elevated us.
Yeah, that's a good point, because otherwise it's just words, right? The integrator brings the words to life, so to speak, you know, and actually puts it into action, not just going through the exercise of just making the beliefs, values, and whatnot, having that posted on a board and never look at it again. Yeah, you've wasted your time. But integrator kind of brings those words to life, and you practice what you preach.
And it takes time.
Of course.
For us, it took us 18 months. It took us 18 months to get all those people off the bus, to get the new people on that were on board with the new mission, vision, values, right? There was some tweaking along the way, right? But it took us 18 months to have a well-oiled machine.
Sure.
Now, you've got such a well-oiled machine, all I focus on every day is just pouring more fuel into that train. Just more. We need a bigger train now. We need to do more. God, I've got all this fuel, you know, and so we just go faster and faster.
That's great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Jeremy, I mean, I appreciate you joining us today. Thank you for all the words of wisdom, and I hope you continued success. Guys out there, if you like this type of content, be sure to like, subscribe, let us know, interact with us through the comments so that we can provide you good perspectives like Jeremy's here that can help you with your business or with your ambitions. From Adam, Jeremy, and Besim, this has been Capital Interactive, and we'll see you the next time.